Hello everybody, is this on? Is this thing on? Testing. Hello, my name is Matthias, also known as Patcom, and I hope we've got somebody on the chat today. Do we have anybody currently watching? Nobody. Let's give people a moment. Hi Severin, how are you? If you guys are live in the video, please say hi on the chat. Hello there, Igor. Nice to see you. I literally moments ago just finished the setup, so I sure hope everything is not gonna fall apart while we're at it. So good. I think it's good time to get started. So let's play some intro. Okay, that was nice, wasn't it? If you have an intro, you have something to show. Okay, so we are meeting today for the first time in a live session. I sure hope you can hear me and see me all right. If that is not the case, if there's going to be any kind of trouble, please make a note on the chat. I am reading stuff way sooner than you can see me, something that I am adjusting to. So please have some moments before you write for me to respond. And I guess with that out of the way, we can go to the presentation. Like I said, my name is Matthias, and we're going to be talking today about Vue.js 3 and Vite. So first, a short disclaimer. Use the chat to ask questions. From time to time, I am going to be switching to the chat, as you can see it here, so that we can have some questions and see the questions, and I can see them too. And try not doing anything that you would regret later on, like being mean to people. Let's try and be respectful to each other in the chat. And if you like what you're seeing, please spread the word. Again, I'm so stressed I can't see straight, but I'm going to try to do my best and show you what I've prepared for you in the context of Vue.js and Vite. Okay, moving on. What is Vite? I sure hope you've at least heard the name, because it's super awesome. It's a new build system, and like pretty much everything that comes from the hand of even you, it's got to be awesome in some way, and it is. It's ultra fast. I mean, like, it's the fastest build system for Vue or for any other web project that I have seen so far. It's so fast because it's using not Webpack but ESBuild. It's the new kid on the block. Also, it's being written in native code rather than in JavaScript. So it's really a lot faster than what we can get with pure JavaScript. It's also doing transpilation from TypeScript and from the latest ES6 that you write down to a less modern JavaScript. It's limited in features. It's not like it's doing you everything that you would be able to do with Webpack. It's sort of preset to some set of functionalities, but it's doing quite a lot. Go check the website, the Vite website. There's also a link to the ESBuild, and you'll be able to see what's making it so nice and so fast. But the biggest thing about Vite is not about using ES build, although the speed of it is really, it's going to change the industry as we know it. What's really making it unique is that it is not a bundler at all. I mean, like, not even close. It's serving ES modules to the browser rather than bundling something and then sending the whole thing to the browser. For production builds, it is, I believe, using parcel or rollup. I think it's rollup to bundle everything into one file. However, for the purposes of development, it's using ES modules. And that is so cool, not because it's using the latest and greatest that's already like months or years available in the browsers, but because it scales. I mean, like, really scales. It scales to any kind of size of project that you might have, because it's always sending that one file or those few files that have changed, not a single bit more. Awesome. And did I mention it's fast? It's 20 to 30 times, really 20 to 30 times faster than what you can have with a super optimized Webpack configuration. Like, we're going to check it out in a moment. We're going to jump into live coding. But for the time being, believe me, it's like really fast. Okay, how do you get started with Vite? It's super simple, especially if you want to get started with Vite and Vue 3. You just do npm init, then the name of the template, which in this case is Vite app, and that's it. You're done. npm install run dev, the usual. So really simple. Moving on, Vue 3. I've decided to slice the section into 3 pieces: the ugly, the bad, and the good stuff. So really, there is some ugly stuff in Vue 3 that you're not gonna like. Definitely, I'm not liking it. There's one really bad thing for me. It might not be the case for you. Actually, it might be the opposite. It might be one of the good stuff for you. For me, it's bad, and I'll explain in a moment why. And there is a bunch of stuff that it's gonna rock the scene. So, removed functionality. That's what ugly in Vue 3. We've been promised that Vue 3 is going to be backwards compatible, that the object syntax is going to stay pretty much the same. Unfortunately, not the case. Really not the case. There are some removals and some really hunky stuff that you're not going to like. So let's go through them. So first and foremost, one of the features that I liked about Vue.js the most was the ability to sort of pipe the filters, so that you can, for example, format a date, and then maybe make it, I don't know, slice off some elements to it, or add some elements to the formatted value. No longer possible. Unfortunately, filters are completely gone. The way to replace filters is with method calls. Like, instead you did just pipe and the name of the filter. Right now you're not doing pipe and the name of the filter. You just wrap the expression you want to filter, sort of format into a function call. And if you want to do more than one, then you wrap a function call within a function call, and so on and so forth. It's not all that bad, because there is a proposal. It's in stage 1, I believe, at the moment. It's not the pipe operator, it's the I don't remember what its name, but it's essentially a pipe greater than, and it's going to work more or less the same as the pipe operator used to work in filters, just for everything else in JavaScript. So you'll be able to do the same thing with pure JavaScript. With the double mustache syntax, you're going to get the same functionality once this feature is back in JavaScript. So we're gonna have to wait. Second thing that's been used in many projects, in the project that I work for, it's been in use like a lot, is the binding of a single property in a two-way fashion, pretty much like the V model, using the .sync modifier. That's gone completely, no longer supported. The sync operator is just not there. Then there's the inline template. It's a funny one because not many people have been using that. And what I mean by not many people, it's essentially for people that are creating templates that are being put together by the backend side, like with CMSs and stuff. Uh, it's okay. It wasn't used all that much. Personally, I'm not gonna miss that one. Key codes, another one that's been removed. So key codes, if I remember correctly, please correct me in the chat if I'm wrong about that. It was a way to name keys by yourself and or specify the keys by the number. That's gone too, in favor of just the regular modifiers such as enter, key up, key down, and so on. From the instance, the listener, the dollar listener is removed, which is kind of strange, but at the same time, it's one of the things that has been happening to Vue 3 in general. If we dive a little bit into the code, how Vue is passing now elements in the JSX syntax or in the render functions, they used to be compartmentalized into elements like listeners, like props, event handlers, scoped slots, and whatnot. Right now, it's one object, just one object top to bottom, and it contains everything. That's why the dollar listeners is no longer there. The dollar on, dollar off, dollar ones that have been sort of simulating or conforming to the event emitter interface, they're also gone. Now you can only bind in, as far as I understand, I might be wrong about that, but it seems like you're only able to bind in the template. And last but not least, from things that I found, is something kind of expected because it was already deprecated in 2.6, and that's the is directive. It can only be now used on the component. However that strange that sounds, you cannot use it on, for example, buttons. Before we used to do things like, okay, this is a button, but please render it as a pretty button from some library or something else like a web component. Right now you have to say, hey, it's a pretty dash button rather than it's a button, but please render it as something else. Okay, so that being said, this is the ugly, and we have that out of the way. Let's go to the bad. My favorite, absolutely favorite interview question is no longer possible. The data cannot be an object anymore, even in the top level in a Vue application. It's gone. It's not possible. Sorry, even you broke my heart. You broke my life. I don't know what I'm gonna do about it. But yeah, your life just got a whole lot easier because that question's not gonna hit you anymore. Let's get to the good stuff, things that I am personally very excited about. And I'm gonna try to show you some stuff that's been already flying around. Like, for example, we have the composition API, which could also be somehow used with 2.6, but it's not exactly like a core element. You could install it in 2.6 as a plugin. The teleport component, really awesome. I've been waiting for this for a long time. Fragments, finally, I might say, finally. And feature illumination through tree shaking. So that one bears a little bit of explanation. We all know what tree shaking is. I mean, I don't really have to explain that to anybody. What Vue 3 does, or has what has been baked into Vue 3, because it's a total rewrite. Okay, Vue 3 is a total rewrite from ground up. It is that every feature, every directive that comes with Vue is tree shakeable. Meaning if you don't use it, you don't get it in the final bundle, making it probably the smallest mainstream framework when it comes to final bundles. Like, it's beating React hands down. It's 3 or 4 times smaller. The bundle is 3 or 4 times smaller. If you zip it, it's even smaller. I won't even go to Angular, which is huge. But this is like yay small. You won't even see that that is happening. So one last thing that's really awesome, and it's a lot. It has a lot of connection to the composition API. It's the decoupling of functions from the context. Not all of them, obviously, but those ones that you can use with composition API, like for example the h that we used to use in render functions, that's been passed on to the render function as a parameter, is now an export from the Vue package. So you don't have to have it passed on from the Vue render function in order to write your own like small components, which is awesome. So everybody is talking about those features. Let's jump into something that's sweet and you won't hear about that too much. Functional components are finally functions. Hello, React developers, you're welcome to join us. You can have everything you've got in React now, even the simple syntax. The functions are, there's no longer a syntax. Hold on a second, someone's constantly pinging me in. I hate that. There is the syntax for template functional, that's gone. The functional field is also no longer supported in object definition. So essentially, if you write a function that returns something, then it's a functional component, period. That functional component will, or that function will obviously receive the props, the context, and whatnot. And it just has to emit the virtual DOM, either using the H function or JSX. Please bear in mind, at the time of this recording, this JSX syntax, the new JSX syntax, is not supported yet, at least not with Vite. And I'm not going to be able to demo that for you. Okay, moving on. Need to document emitted events. I think that's one of the prettiest things that has happened to Vue. You've got this new emits emit field in the object definition, that if you emit something and you don't put it there, it's just gonna like emit you a warning in the console, then saying that, hey, maybe it makes sense that you document this because it would be kind of useful for the users of your component. But there's one more thing. There's always something extra that comes with Vue. And that extra in this case is that those elements in emits configuration option, those are functions that are getting the value that you're emitting with the event. And if you return a false or falsy value, then it will not be emitted. You can stop propagation of that event at that time. And when I mean propagation, I obviously don't mean even bubbling. I just mean that when your component at some point in time emits the value and you would like to abort it, stop it, before it gets to the parent, then you have an option to do that, which is absolutely awesome. Okay, no more global Vue instance, so you cannot import Vue from Vue anymore. Right now we have, like I mentioned before, there are lots of exports from the Vue package now. What you get is a create app, which essentially returns you a Vue instance. And by the way, if you would like to globally register a component or a mixin, then you don't do that on the Vue instance like you did before. You do it on the instance being returned from create app function. So that's create app is the new Vue, so to speak. Usable exports, I already mentioned that. For the composition API, we have ref, reactive. For render functions, we have h. There's like tons and tons and tons of them. We're going to go through in the live coding session in a moment, at least some of them. And there's one more nice thing that I really like, that I think it should have been way more like voiced, like louder to everybody. Hey, finally we have a way to intercept the process of loading dynamic components and saying, okay, before you render, just show me this, and once you've rendered it, then show the real component, and if there is an error, then show something else, like, sorry, I can't load it, something has happened, most likely you're not connected to the internet anymore, stuff like that. Okay, so talking is cheap. Let's show some code. Before we go into the code, I would like to remind you, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat. I'm looking at the chat constantly, so if you have something, then we can take a look at what's in there. Right now, no questions. I would kind of beg you to ask some questions. It's gonna be way more interesting for you if you do questions. Okay, talking is cheap, show me the code. So let's jump into the code. Okay, so here's my Visual Studio. I'm in a folder called presentation, and we're gonna start a new project. This project is gonna be obviously maintained by Vite. So npm init Vite app. It takes just a few moments, and there we go. The project is set up. The usual npm install. And yes, I'm not using Yarn. I'm like old-fashioned this way. Although more and more I'm thinking about switching to Yarn because of how npm doesn't work. Well, let's see how it goes. Okay, there we go. We've got the dependencies installed, and we do npm run dev, sorry. And there it is. Let's see, it's 3002. Let's refresh the page, and we've got our Vue application. How easy was that? Let's see the modules that I talked about being loaded. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger, and as you can see, hello world.vue, it's a component that's inside of here. The app.vue component, the index.css, which is turned into a JavaScript module as well. The template is loaded separately for hello world, and so on and so forth. I believe if we scroll up here, we can also see the Vue as a module being loaded, the main application file that imports Vue. And we should be able to go to sources. Okay, and maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger for the time being. And in the sources, we should be able to see src Vue, which is the transpiled file. We can pretty print it. Doesn't help much. The template is also not all that super. Essentially, the source map support is not so great at the moment. That's what I wanted to show you here. But the modules are loading. And oh boy, they're working really fast. Okay, let's go back to the console. And let's clean up the project a little bit so we can work with it nicer. I'm going to remove most of it. That here we don't need, that here we don't need, and that here we don't need as well. Now a little bit of magic. I'm going to copy something that I prepped for you in here. And with that, let's get started. Let me see what I have to start with. I did a nice sort of list what I want to show you. Okay, I showed you Vite. I've cleaned up the project. Now let's see some fragments. Usually when we go to a Vue application and we would like to have two elements like h1 and h2 in one file, hello world h1 and maybe another hello world, you would have to have a wrapping div, wrapping element. That's no longer necessary. You can do one of them or after another, and it's going to work. Unfortunately, as you can see, I still use Vite or Vitor, the plugin for Visual Studio, and it gives me the squiggly line telling that, hey, you need to have just one, which is not the case. I'm using Vue 3. Hey, you should know about that. And the way to tell it about it is to go to the settings. I'm going to use the workspace settings. And the name of the setting is Vite validation template. And validation template should be somewhere around here. JavaScript. Oh, there is a typo. Vite validation template. You turn that off. We can close the settings file. It's not going to go away immediately. We have to close the file, open it again, and there we go. There's no more squiggly lines, but there's also no more validation for the templates, which kind of sucks for the time being, but okay. So let's stick for a moment with one thing, with just one h1 element, but we're going to add a button that will be a counter. So we're going to go button, which is add click is going to increment a value, and it's going to display counter and count. Now, how are we going to create those two elements, the count and the increment, will be different than Vue 2, because we're going to use the setup method. Please remember, you can also do that with Vue 2.6 if you import the Composition API plugin. So we've got the setup method, and whatever this method returns is going to be available in the template. So we're going to return two things, which one will be the increment, and the other one will be counter or count. So how do we define count? Count is going to be a const, which is going to be referenced to 0. We want to start our counting by 0. What is ref? You're going to see that in a moment. The other thing that's going to be a const is going to be the increment function, which is going to take no arguments and is going to be doing increment value plus plus. Now, this thing is strange, and we're not doing that in the template here. It's just how refs work. Refs are essentially turning a value into an object that has this value as a property. So thankfully, templates unwrap that object automatically, so you don't have to do anything about it. Oh, we have something here. So ref needs to be imported, obviously. Ref from Vue. And with that, we have a counter. Each time I increment that counter, it gets incremented. Now, it's all fine, nice and dandy. It doesn't look really awesome because it isn't. It's just another place to actually define what you need. But we can do one better. We can extract that into a separate file. We can name it the React way. I'm sorry, but this is how the community is usually writing those functions. And we can create a use counter function that's in completely different unit. It could be in a completely different library. It could be imported from somewhere, and have those two things here, and then import it. Import, and is that the default? Yeah. Import use counter from features counter. And instead of doing that, we can just go ahead and spread the use counter in here, which should give us the exact same functionality. So composition API really is about composing things. But that's not all. Who said if it's just a module that we have to export just one function, just those features? Can't the features have additional functionality, like maybe a counter button component? Let's import that counter button component. We can even do that in the same line here. Counter button. Obviously, we need to register that in components. Counter button. And instead of doing that, we can do counter button. It's a functional component. It's a function, as you can see. It's actually an arrow function. It takes a count and on click, which means that if we write at click, it's going to translate in this object that's being passed on as on click. So let's pass it on the count to be just count. This is the variable we have from the use counter function. And at click, we're going to do increment. And let's save it. We still got count. Obviously, the text is different because the render function is a little bit different. We can do stuff like so. And it re-renders as well. And see how fast that is? I mean, ding, ding. I'm just love playing with this. It's like the best thing ever. It's even better than sliced bread. I mean, I like biting into bread, but this I love even more. So we know we can export one component, but why not export two components? Since those are just named exports, why don't we do a display for the counter? And we have a counter component that displays stuff. It just takes the count as a prop. So let's import that guy here as well, and let's display it. Counter count is count. And there we go. And count. And there is a counter. Now, I would like to show you with this extra component the teleport. For that, we need to go into the index.html and make a placeholder outside of our application. So we have an HR, just so that we can see that it's separated. And then we're going to have a div that will have an ID of, let's say, outside. Inside that div, let's put in, of course, everybody will see that message. Okay, thank you, Marta. Let's switch to the right view here. I hope that is better. Thank you so much. Okay, so this div is outside of our app div. We're going to have some text here in a paragraph, some other text. And with that in place, we will put this guy, this counter component, into a teleport. It has a to prop. Our div is called outside, so we have to specify it as a CSS selector. And lo and behold, there's our counter, and it is still reactive. It's still working, and I think it's the best thing ever because we now have a proper capability to render dialogues really outside of the application. That was one of the bigger headaches that I've had for using Vue, that it was always contained within that div, and the main application needed to have a placeholder for dialogues and whatnot. This here is no longer necessary. Let's see the chat. Okay, the Vite could transpile the JS code. Does it mean we don't need to use Babel while using Vite? That is actually true. we don't need to use Babel. We actually can't use Babel because the thing that is doing the transpilation is ESBuild. It's another thing, the native code that is like parsing the ES next and transpiling it down to whichever level you have selected. It's actually it's just a command line option, the target, how low you want to go. And I've made the screen bigger for you. I am so sorry I missed that. Much better. Okay. Moving on. So we've seen the teleport. We've seen how it renders outside. Obviously, you can make it like conditionally rendered outside VIF with VIF, and then render it VL somewhere else. That's also possible. So what's next in store? We've got the counter already done. Okay. One of the things that I liked about React, however strange that sounds, because those of you who know me know I really don't like React. But the thing that I did like, especially about React hooks, is that I can do stuff within a function that is then really like encapsulated. Everything is in one place, and I have a control. I can see at once what is actually happening in that hook or composable in this case. And for that, I have prepped something called the MousePosition feature. It does a very simple thing. It has a reactive object. A reactive object differs from a ref in that way that all the fields are just, they don't have the value in it from the use case standpoint. Obviously, there's a difference in how they're implemented, but for the user, end user of Vue, reactive means that this object, you don't have to reference the dot value inside of the fields of the component. So we're going to just have things like position.x, and it's going to be fine. So unmounted and unmounted, by the way, there is a difference in the naming. It was before destroy, I believe, and now it's before unmount. Kind of small change, but significant if you have an old code base and you need to update it to the latest. So on unmounted is when the component is unmounted. We can use that for binding event listeners. In here, I have a very simple thing that on mouse move is going to update mouse position. The way you use it is you import the use mouse position from features mouse position, and then you just use it. The thing that I like about composition function is that you just say position or mouse, even better, use mouse position, and that's it. I've also included a configuration option, leave clear on leave. We can use that here as well. Why not? I'm gonna say true in here in the header so that it is really visible. We can say position or mouse x slash mouse.y. Let's see how that works. See, when I leave the cursor outside, it's clearing. When I move the mouse, it updates. And we have nothing of the plumbing, the browser, the DOM plumbing that we need inside of our component. It's really an extracted, completely extracted functionality. I'm loving it. You might ask, where are the update mouse position methods and clear position? Well, don't you just love JavaScript? You can create a function after the return statement, and hoisting is going to take care of it for you. I just love how it works. There's no other language that allows you to do that I know of. If you know a language, type it in the chat. Anyways, that's the whole definition of mouse position hook or composable. Okay, let's see if there are any questions in the chat. No, it's still just much better. I hope you like it. Okay, what's in store now? We have the teleport already sorted out. Okay, one thing to note is that you're not limited to functional components when you're doing stuff like this, when a functionality has more exports than just the named exports. There is also a possibility, I'm not going to show you this implemented in the application, but I think I can show you this in person, index person. So here's a use person hook. Let's call them hooks. Let's not like make it more confusing for everybody. So use person just exports a reactive first name, last name. And then we have two files. One is the person viewer, and one is the person editor. Those person viewers, person editor is that actually I wanted to show you. Let's make it bigger for a moment. This is the new .sync implementation using vModel. And if we can do a second file here down below. Oh, no, not the second file. Let's use that file. Let's use it anyways. So, person, I need to do one thing. And because I don't want to do any typos. So here's the person from component persons. Here's in the setup, here's our person, and we better not forget the comma. And we've got the template, which is gonna be here. So this is the person editor and person viewer. And what am I forgetting? I'm forgetting two things: person editor and person viewer. Okay, so those two things are here, and as you would expect, those two things are now editable, but they're not using the vModel.bind or .sync modifier. They're using not vbind, but this time it's vModel. Luckily enough, this event that's being emitted is exactly the same as with the .sync, so migration should not be a problem. You just have to remember that wherever it is being used, you don't do vbind, you just do vModel and the prop name. By default, it's still using the sensible defaults. So for checkboxes, it's checked. For inputs, it's value. And for your own components, if you don't specify a prop, then it's still value. So that didn't change. Hopefully, it will not change before the final release. But you can have more than one model at this point, which is awesome. And I wanted to show you also the behavior when you do not register which events you're emitting. See, component is missing a template or render function. Oh, why? Why, oh, why did you do this to me? Oh, okay. So let's refresh that. See, extraneous non-emits event listeners, update first name, update last name were passed to the component but could not be automated, and so on and so forth. And you might want to consider using the emits. So that's what's happening here. And once we do say we emit those, everything is clear. Okay. Someone says, Igor says, it really looks similar to React hooks. Yes, it's base, the idea is completely like ripped off from React. Some things are good to be ripped off from other frameworks, some are not. The TypeScript support in Vue.js 3. Thank you. So, first of all, Vite, as in the ES build that's working underneath the hood, is stripping off all the type annotations from your code. So you don't need to do transpilation. The IDE support is what you're looking for. And that means that, let me go live here. And that means that whatever the IDE will support, and remember, we're just talking one single function. So if we do, for example, mouse here, const mouse equals, and use mouse position here, mouse, then you don't even have to have, wait, I'm having some compile errors, and that makes the IDE freak out. You don't even have to have TypeScript support to get proper code completion. Like Visual Studio is the best in like from all the other IDEs that I've ever used. It's not only free, but it really understands JavaScript. TypeScript is also going to be the same, even better, because you won't have those like additional things that Visual Studio thinks you might would like to use. So that's one thing. Secondly, installing TypeScript support is not all that hard. You just do, first of all, you need to have a script lang ts, and I believe that is it. You just write TypeScript from now on. Obviously, Visual Studio needs to boot up all the things, and see, it's way smaller. We're just using TypeScript. Igor, is that looking better for you? I sure hope it is. Okay, that's one of the things that I am getting used to. I'm getting used to having immediate feedback from the audience and not like having some feedback up after 20 seconds. But I sure hope it's it's usable. Igor says, Vito console messages of which component has been updated looks wonderful. I absolutely agree. Yes, and you have it twice. You can have it in here. Let's say we update this one. Okay, you have to really do an update. So maybe we'll just initialize the mouse.x to 100. And you see immediately which file has been updated. The same thing in here. If we just mess with the X for a moment, you should see, oh, you're not seeing that. Ah, something's not working. Let's try rebooting. This is, okay, this is the thing. We are in the front-end world. If we would be in .NET or, God forbid, Java, then we would be talking about stuff that's been released like 2-3 months ago, and that those things are generally stable. All the initial bugs have been fixed. But no, we are in the front-end world. And in the front-end world, we talk about alpha releases. Like, we're the good guys, we're the bad guys, I would rather say. We're really the bad guys. We're looking people on their hands while they're creating stuff. Like, we're looking at a train that's like a bullet train. It's moving so fast you can't see the difference. Now this Vite is in alpha. It's not even a beta. Okay, and I'm demoing it live on my first live event on YouTube. So I got some balls, I would say. But we're doing front end. This is the way we live and breathe. So there you go. Okay, what else? What else? Was there another question? Support, TypeScript support has been there. Okay. Let's see the rest. So we've got the person viewer and editor. So I showed you the V model binding. Oh, I know what I wanted to show you. Something really cool. I'm going to import an example component from, and I believe it is components async component. There we go. Obviously, I'm going to register it here, and this guy is going to show only if the counter that we already have, that's the only variable that we have, so we need to do something about it, when it is when the counter is more than 10, when the count is more than 10. Why have you shown now? Go. Oh. VF, man, come on, now. You're not seeing anything, okay? You're not seeing anything. We are incrementing the count up to 10 and 11. I'm dynamically loaded. You will also see that the file has actually been dynamically loaded. See, this is example. If we refresh the page, you will see that the example component is nowhere to be found in here. If we increment the counter, it's been loaded, but that's not the best thing. Let's go back to a page where it is not there. And I think I'm going to have to make it bigger because I don't remember where the control is. Now we're going to switch to a very slow network. What a very slow network is a very fast network, but with a second of latency. So it's not slow, it's slow in receiving packages. Now watch this carefully. I am loading and I am loaded. See, all the elements have about 1 second delay, the example view. It's been transpiled underneath the hood, so it's more than a second. Then we have the styles for it, because it has some styles, and it has the template. Let me show you how this is implemented. And with that, we're going to be finalizing the set of features I wanted to present to you today. Okay, so it's a functional component because I just chose to make it a functional component, but it doesn't have to be a functional component. It can be a like a regular component, like a Vue file. And this component is for showing whenever it's loading. This is the loader, something that we previously would just stuff into the components section. Right now we have to go through this define async component. It's mandatory. You can't not do it. Am I back to the small view? No, I'm not. Okay. So this is the new API that is needed. Just for the kicks of it, let's change it to TS. Let's see if that works. Obviously, this guy works, but let's see if that other thing works. And if we import that guy with the .ts, yeah, incrementing the counter, boom, it's working. So TypeScript working. We need to adjust Visual Studio a little bit so that the extensions are actually required. By the way, if you saw the person index, is the index here? No. The person re-export, I did need to specify the Vue extension. I kind of like it because I know what's underneath the hood, and that I'm referencing a file rather than a directory. Unfortunately, they don't require you to do that with JavaScript files, and I think that's a mess. It should be required all the time because we should know what we're actually importing. Digression over. Going back to the async component. So the async component has the loading component, but it also should have or could have an error component if things go sideways, on error if things go sideways, suspensible. Not really sure what that is. Never looked at the documentation. We're going to get back to the documentation in just a few seconds. And timeout, whenever timeout happens. Delay, don't know really what that is. It sounds like it can delay the execution of loading for whatever time, for whatever reason. So there we go. That's the async components. And let's load that guy again. Yeah, there we go. Now, I mentioned documentation a moment ago. Before we get there, any questions on the chat? Okay, Vue DevTools extension still supported in Vue 3? Not yet, but will be. Definitely will be. Also, a question regarding Vuex. Are there any major changes here? I don't know about Vuex. It's not ready yet. I think it's in an early alpha, and I wasn't like brave enough to dive in. Might be connected to the fact that I am really not a huge fan of the external store. What you can do in Vue 3 is just use the how was it called? This thing here, person index. You can use the reactive thing and share it. Create a reactive element and share it between components, thus creating a global state. You don't really need Vuex, aka Redux clone of any kind, because this is already reactive and it's already working throughout components. If you change it in one, the changes will immediately influence the rendering of another component. So if you can, please don't use Vuex. It's a mess. And there's way better. There are way better ways to externalize functionality than using a store. My personal opinion. And if you don't like it, like, you don't have to agree with me. I know Redux has turned the world upside down, and I hate it with a passion. So if you are able not to use it, not to use Vuex, don't use it. People that know me know why I'm saying that, so I'm just not gonna go there. Okay, but moving back to what I was going to say. Documentation. Let me pull up some files here. Okay, there's the RFC. That's what I wanted to have. Come on. This is the actual only documentation for Vue 3. There is nothing more. You will see some tutorials on the net. You will also see some articles. They're all based on this set of RFCs at the moment, and lots of comments in Git. Documentation has been the least of the worry for the Vue team for the time being. They wanted to finalize the API and make sure that the APIs actually make sense. So there is no documentation for Vue 3. I personally grew to love Vue for the fact that the documentation rocked. From day zero, when I learned that there is such a thing as Vue.js, when I looked at the guide, looked at the API documentation, I fell in love with it completely. And I think every framework should have such a great documentation. For Vue 3, I'm guessing the release is going to be postponed quite a lot because of not having documentation. I actually hope that will be the case, that they will now work on the basis of those RFCs to create an updated documentation for the version 3. Okay, let's see the chat here for a moment. DevTools there. Question regarding Vuex already answered. Please don't use Vuex. Okay, that was pretty much it from what I wanted to show you. I hope you've liked what you've seen. I hope you liked. You don't have to have this special question for why data is sometimes um, an object and sometimes a function. Some of you had an interview with me, and you know I'm pretty strict about this. So lucky you. I'm so not happy about that. Anyways, that was it. I hope you enjoyed the show. It's 3 minutes past the time. I'm giving you the rest of the evening free. Enjoy, have a beer or something stronger, and take a look at Vue. I hope you like it. Cheers, bye bye.